when we look at things like leaky gut, when we look at things like IBS, when we look at things like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or mental health, because that's the first place I go when somebody says I'm dealing with anxiety or depression or OCD, I always start gut first, not brain first, because that's just where it starts. You alluded to that earlier. When we're looking at any of those things, we have to rebuild the microbiome first. That's always ground zero for me.
Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Hey friend, welcome back to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host and health coach, Jenn Trepeck, here with you every week for Wellness Without the Weirdness. So it's officially December, which I think means a lot of emotions. There is stress, there's joy, frustration, anxiousness, loneliness. It's a time of year that feels like a giant soup of feelings, or I guess a pot of soup of feelings on high heat. And it's not that we don't feel many of these things the rest of the year. I think it's just that everything feels amplified right now. So this is a time when we might want some added support. And what's more, our typical health professionals may not be our go-to resources for that. So that's why I'm so looking forward to connecting all of you with our featured guest for today. He's a natural health educator, supplement formulator, and host of Vitality Radio. With over 30 years of experience, he has dedicated his career to educating people on natural wellness, helping them achieve vitality through lifestyle changes and the use of supplements. As the owner of Vitality Nutrition, a family business founded in 1977, he continues to lead in providing personalized health solutions. His podcast, Vitality Radio, further extends his reach in promoting natural healing and wellness education to a wider audience. Please help me welcome Jared Sinclair.
I'm so glad to be here, Jen. Thanks for the welcome, and thanks for letting me share your microphone here. I appreciate it very much.
Well, likewise, I'm thrilled you're here. This is not our first conversation. We've had a few, as you know, over the last year, I should say. So friends, when you finish listening today, pop over to Vitality Radio. Check out the episode from May 14th of 2025 called Salad with a Side of Fries, the mindset of healthy eating with Jenn Trepeck. That was such a great one. It was fun.
We had a lot of fun on that episode, and I've been looking forward to this, even though it's been a long time coming now, 6 months.
I know. Yeah. I know, but I'm so excited, and I want to dig in with you. We'll start with your story. We just have one more piece first, which is to tell our members what they're getting this week. So friends, join us in the Happy Healthy Hub. Being a member of the Hub is the next best thing to working with me as your health coach. You get a recipe each week delivered to your inbox, curated articles and additional discounts from me and our partners. You get interview episodes like this one in full video, including behind the scenes content, a community with the ability to post and comment on others' posts, plus access to the 24/7 AMA, which stands for Ask Me Anything. That's how we target your specific questions or challenges. You can upvote other people's questions, see past answers, and so much more. All of this, by the way, is yours for just $12 a month, or prepay the whole year and get 2 months free. So your recipe this week is for chocolate cuties. So you know the cuties, like the little mandarin oranges? They're in season right now. And so it's like the little segments of the mandarin orange dipped in chocolate. Unbelievably easy to make. And I'm also adding a few other ideas in there for you to change it up. They're great to have around the house, or if you need to bring something somewhere. I think they're delicious and super simple. So for this recipe, plus this episode in full video, access to our community chat, the 24/7 Ask Me Anything, go to asaladwithasideoffries.com/membership. From there, you click subscribe now, and then follow the prompts to enter your payment info, create your login to access the hub and all of your benefits. Remember, you're going to asaladwithasideoffries.com/membership. Of course, this supports this podcast and the show, but most importantly, it supports your health. Okay, Jared. So your story is interesting because you grew up in a health food store.
Literally. Yeah.
Yeah. So will you share what that was like and maybe what you learned from that other people didn't learn?
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned 1977. I was born in 1972. So I was 5 when my parents opened this place. And I started working here almost right away, dumping the trash, pulling product out of boxes, pricing things, putting them on the shelf, that sort of thing. And I like to say that, I worked my way up into middle management. And then eventually I kicked my parents out when they decided they didn't want to want to run the store anymore and bought it from them about 31 years ago now. But as a kid in a health food store, there are a lot of interesting learnings. For one thing, I got to talk to a lot of people, particularly once I became a teenager and was really active with customers and not just cleaning up in the back room. I got to talk to a lot of people about real health concerns, and I became probably a lot more aware about things like arthritis and high blood pressure and, you name the ailment than probably a lot of kids are, because, most kids aren't dealing with those ailments. Although here in America today, we have a lot of kids, unfortunately, that aren't
Unfortunately.
very healthy. But back then in the 70s and 80s, that wasn't much of a thing. Most kids were pretty healthy. Everybody was doing okay. And I was, I guess, more aware is the best way to put it of what some of the ailments might be down the road for me and people my age. So that was one thing. But also, my parents were just weird. I mean, I say it with all the love in the world. I was raised very weird. When my father passed away about 15 years ago now, and at his funeral, I gave a talk and I talked about what my school lunch looked like. And my school lunch looked very different from my friends' school lunches. There weren't Twinkies or ding dongs. There wasn't white bread. There wasn't PB&J. Like, there was a bunch of stuff that I didn't get that my friends got. And what was interesting was my lunches looked really weird. But over time, I had kids like trading their junk food for my healthier food because they really liked it and thought, like, this stuff's good and I don't get this at my house. And I'm like, yeah, ding dongs are good. I don't get those at my house. so so it kind of went both ways, as far as that goes. But it was an interesting upbringing for sure. I, at a very young age, got super excited about health and wellness and nutrition and became pretty passionate about it, even as just a young teenager.
And then when did it sort of, evolve into some of the work that you're doing now, with your own formulations and, kind of focusing even on the education piece of it all?
Yeah, a lot of that just it's almost hard to explain how it happened. It just kind of did happen, but the whole necessity is the mother of invention kind of a thing. My dad was very involved in the nutrition industry from before the store was opened all the way up until when he passed, more on the manufacturing side of things than the actual retail side of things. And so he actually owned a company that's still in existence today, Ridgecrest Herbals. A lot of people are familiar with that brand. He used to be the vice president of some of the biggest health supplement companies in the country, Solare, Nature's Herbs, Mega Food, companies like that. So I had a lot of exposure to that, formulating and manufacturing side that also most people don't have. And I got the bug when the very first thing was there was a craze going on, and you're a lot younger than me, Jen. But do you remember the Body for Life craze?
Oh, for sure.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. So for anybody listening that remembers that, it was as big of a fitness fad as there's ever been, I think. I mean, this guy, Bill Phillips, he'd built a real marketing machine. And I didn't like his supplements. I thought that they were very junky as far as ingredients, artificial colors and aspartame and a bunch of stuff that I didn't want to sell in my store. But I had people coming in all the time, every day, probably a dozen people or more coming to the store looking for his stuff. And so that's where the necessity part came in. I was like, well, I don't want to miss out on this business, but I also don't want to sell that stuff. So then I developed a meal replacement product that was much, much cleaner than what he was doing. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was very much kind of a fish out of water at that point. But I fortunately had a couple of friends in the industry. I had my dad that knew more than I did, and I leaned on them, and we created a product that people really, really liked. It actually became our number one seller. So then that gave me some confidence that maybe I could do this for the formulation side. And the education side started with just me talking one on one with people in the aisles of the store and recognizing that it's funny because if you want me to remember somebody's name or somebody's face or where I put my keys, like, good luck. But if you want me to remember a study that I read 10 years ago about vitamin C and what it does for the immune system, that stuff, for whatever reason, my brain locks into. And I'm really good at grabbing a hold of that stuff. I guess it's the passion side of it. I just love it so much. And being able to regurgitate that to people that need to hear it. And so education was always my favorite thing. I got invited to be a guest on a local radio show. We're here in Utah. I was on the Utah Jazz Radio Network with a personal trainer. And he didn't know much about supplements. He was a customer of ours, and he admitted that he didn't know much about supplements, but he got a lot of calls. It was a call-in show asking about supplements. And so he asked me to come on and answer questions. So I did that once. It was a real hit. And he had me on every week for like 6 months. And I loved it. And he decided not to do the show anymore. And that slot was going to go to somebody else. And he said, "Do you want to take over?" And that's how Vitality Radio started. And it was local radio for like 12 years before it became a podcast. So now we're 18 years into it now. And that's where I do most of the educating. And starting with that very first formula way back then, I've been formulating ever since. I have about 40 products on the market now.
Yeah, I love it. We're so aligned in that education first piece, which I think is why also, our conversation on your show was so helpful for people. So specifically today, so our conversation is about emotional vitality, this emotional soup, this time of year, as I've apparently decided to call it. And you use the word vitality in every aspect of your work,
Right.
with the products, the show, all the pieces. So I'd love to hear from you. What does vitality mean to you? And what does it mean when applied to our emotions?
Well, interestingly enough, I always call Vitality the store my first child before I had any of my other children. And I nurtured it, kind of in the same way. I am completely crazy about it, like I am my own kids and now my grandkids. But the funny thing is, my parents opened up the store. It was called Nutrition Shop. And when I took it over, I wanted to change the name to something that meant something. And it was so much harder to come up with a name for this store than it was to come up with a name for any of my kids. Uh, and, and so that word vitality means a lot to me. Unfortunately, the downside is it's not the most unique name in the world. There are other vitalities out there, but in Utah, there wasn't anything. And I wanted the name to be a promise. So when I hire somebody new here at Vitality, I tell them, look, we are in a retail business, but we're not in the average retail business. We're not selling tires or t-shirts. We're selling the promise of vitality. And that means something. That means feeling energized, being, resilient when it comes to stress and infections and cold and flu season, because we're also in that thing right now, right? All of that kind of thing. And being able to do the things that you love to do deep, deep, deep into the later years of your life. I'm here now, 6 grandchildren, and I get down on my hands and knees and play with my grandkids. And I want to be able to do that for the next 20 or 30 years, just like I do it at 53 years old. And so it's just the ability to feel your best, and not because you got lucky, but because you got educated and knew how to take care of this beautiful body that you were blessed with.
I love that. So then taking that to our emotions, we're going to talk about both lifestyle and
Mm-hmm.
supplementation, but I think, what does it mean to have emotional vitality?
So that name came about because of my wife and I. So my wife and I are relative newlyweds. When this airs, we'll be just about 2 years into our marriage. We've known each other for 8 years now. And when we met, she was not experiencing vitality in any aspect of her life. She was physically not healthy. She had 5 different medical diagnoses, everything from IBS to bipolar disorder and a bunch of stuff in between, multiple different autoimmune conditions and things like that. And life was just getting to the next day, basically. And I had never been in that position, especially on the mental emotional side of things. I've had a few things, not too many. I've mostly been physically healthy through my life, but I've had a few little things here and there. But I'd never dealt with this crippling anxiety and depression that she was dealing with, and had dealt with since she was 13 years old. And yet when I met her, there was a spark that I could see it deep inside of her. She couldn't see it herself. And I knew that I could help her find that spark. It was cosmic. I knew it from the day that we had our first conversation. And when we got into this relationship, it was a friendship very much first. We were the best of friends. We still call ourselves Calvin and Hobbes. She's Calvin, for anybody that knows that cartoon. And, I'm the tiger that she snuggles up with when things aren't, going her way, or she's angry or whatever else. Now, what's funny is that was very apropos back then, but I don't have to be Hobbes too much anymore because she has found emotional vitality. But we went through a bunch of mindset work. We learned about the reticular activating system. We learned about how to use curiosity to figure out why we were getting ourselves stuck, lots of that sort of thing. And then as we learned it, and as it changed our lives together, then we wanted to share it with others. And we started doing episodes on my podcast. And we were trying to think, what do we want to call them? Well, we're the Vitality Radio Podcast. We're Vitality Nutrition. We're working on people's mental, emotional state. And that's where emotional vitality came from.
Amazing. And so with the caveat that we are not here to diagnose, treat, cure, prevent any disease. I think as we talk about lifestyle and supplements, we talk about lifestyle all the time. And I think the supplementation piece is particularly curious for people.
For sure.
So maybe before we get into the weeds, what's your approach when thinking about using supplementation for emotional vitality?
Well, I look at the body and the mind as, one great whole. You can't separate the two things. And the emotions are right there with it, right? It's all part of the same package. And so a perfect example, again, and I'll use my wife probably 10 times during this conversation, as an example, is she had all these mental, emotional issues. She'd been diagnosed with these things, and she had unfortunately embraced those things as kind of part of her identity. But she started with a whole bunch of gut issues, and gut issues lead to brain issues, and brain issues lead to emotional issues as well. And so I always look at it that way. I have a really simple philosophy. The philosophy is that we need to get out whatever's in the body that's creating roadblocks, dams, whatever you want to call it, preventing us from obtaining the vitality that we're longing for. And then we need to nourish the body with the things that are missing so that the body has the raw materials to create that vitality. And the nourish side is where supplements come in. Now, obviously, diet, exercise, all those things matter. I know you talk about that stuff a lot on your show, and I do as well. But my niche, I guess, has become helping people figure out the supplement world, because the supplement world is confusing, it's overwhelming, and they're being hit with marketing messages from every possible angle. And I tell people, I help them kind of see through the smoke screens and propaganda of marketing and really cut down to what actually matters when it comes to what you're putting in your body from the supplement side of things.
Yeah, 1,000%. And it's going back to the piece that you were saying about what's creating the roadblocks and what's missing in the body. Even as some of my mentors say too, none of us have a Xanax deficiency.
Right.
You're right.
Or Prozac or anything else
right,
in the pharmaceutical world.
That's not to say that they are not tools.
Right.
That for some people, they are life-changing.
Mm-hmm.
And there are more tools in the tool belt, which is exactly what we're going to talk about. And I want to dig deeper into some of those specifics, and then not just into herbs and ingredients and nutrients specifically as we think about, as you were saying, both the gut and the brain and the mind-body connection. And then even from your perspective, also some of those daily choices that, we want to work with the supplements, because as I often say, we can't supplement our way out of our daily choices.
Right.
So let's do all of that after we highlight our partner for this episode. You know that feeling when wellness just feels too loud? Every headline, like we were just saying, all of the supplements, that propaganda, the noise, everything is telling us something different. Every influencer has a new rule. And somehow we're left wondering if we're the problem. Well, let me tell you, you're not. You've just been given broken tools. That's why I wrote Uncomplicating Wellness. Ditch the rules, quiet the noise, reclaim your life. It's not another plan to follow. In fact, it's a guide to finally filter the noise and trust yourself again. The book is Science, Sanity, and Real Foundations of Feeling Your Best without obsession, guilt, or burnout. If you've ever wished wellness could feel simple, this book is for you. Find Uncomplicating Wellness wherever books are sold, or text the word book, BOOK, to 833-801-0500 to learn more with a clickable link. Again, text the word book, BOOK, to 833-801-0500. Let's move from exhaustion to clarity, from fear to discernment, and from chasing healthy to truly feeling well on your own terms. Okay, Jared, and thinking about this idea of what's missing in the body, what's creating the roadblocks? Where might someone want to start? And obviously, we're going to need some sort of specifics,
Hmm.
So, you tell us how, the best frame for having this conversation and to think about it, especially this time of year.
Well, because of the limited amount of time that we have, we'll kind of, cut to the chase. There's a lot of different things you could look at, obviously. But one of the most common questions that I get and have gotten for years, ever since I started the radio show and even before that, is essentially, where do I start? Somebody walks into a store like mine, we've got almost 5,000 different products that we sell. And, you're looking around the shelves and thinking, well, which one's right for me? They all look good, but how do I know? And so there was that. And I came up with years ago what I call my Vital Five, which are the 5 supplements that I think every adult American should at least consider taking. There is no such thing as a universal list, but this is as universal as I could figure out how to make it. And the Vital Five consist of a great multivitamin. I always say a great before multivitamin because I think most multivitamins on the market aren't that great. One of my favorite podcast episodes that I've done on Vitality Radio has a very simple title. It's the shortest title of any of my episodes, and it's just called Centrum Sucks. And and that's because I think it does. So anyway, a great multivitamin to fill the gaps. Omega-3s, very few of us are getting enough omega-3s. Magnesium. I always tell people that if I didn't know who you were, I didn't know your age, your gender, your health status, you sent me an email and said, Jared, I'm only willing to take one supplement. What would it be? I say magnesium. And the reason is because you're pretty much guaranteed that you're deficient in it because it's just not in the food supply like it once was. We're getting something like 60 to 70% less than our ancestors were getting. And we have much higher consistent stress levels, meaning we're burning through magnesium a lot more than we used to. And the form that I love is magnesium bisglycinate. I think it's ultimately the best for most people. And then I talk about probiotics, and we can talk a lot about that when it comes to emotional vitality because there's a huge link there, as there is with magnesium and omega-3. And then digestive enzymes is the one that most people don't expect to hear, but I'm a huge, huge believer in digestive enzymes. And once we hit around 30-ish years old in America, most of us are pretty deficient. And if we're not breaking down our food and utilizing our food effectively, then we become more deficient in all the other things that we would typically get from our food. So that's the refill side, I guess, getting things where they should be. The detox side, there's an area that I love to focus on because I don't think it gets enough focus, and that's getting rid of endocrine disrupting chemicals. I think there's a
Yes,
major problem there.
absolutely. So all the liver support,
Hmm.
all the herbs. But let's go back to the gut for a second, as you were talking about, because I think, we hear often serotonin is made in the gut. Even people can be, to your point on the probiotics, people can be making serotonin and then the gut bugs are eating it and it's never even getting to the brain. So, speak a little bit to what we're looking for in supporting that, choosing some of these nutrients and that connection, especially, magnesium, omega-3s, you know, probiotic digestive enzymes.
So, on the probiotic side, I love to make people aware of what are called spore forming probiotics, or they're oftentimes known as soil based probiotics, things like that. These are environmental. Jen, I'm sure you know what they are. I'm blown away by how many people have not heard about these things yet. They're just not being talked about enough in my book. I discovered them about 18 years ago when I was very first starting to formulate supplements after that first supplement I told you about, the meal replacement way back when. And what I was looking for was a probiotic that was truly resilient, that could be shipped across the country without dying, that would survive the stomach acid and get into the intestinal tract where it could actually make a difference. And that was more, well, I've learned a lot more about this over the last 10 years, but that really made a long term, more permanent change in the microbiome. Because the thing that bugged me a lot as a kid and early on owning Vitality Nutrition is we'd have people take probiotic supplements and they would feel better while they were on the probiotic. And they might be on it for 3 months or 6 months or a year. And anytime they went off of it, they didn't feel good anymore. And that didn't make sense to me because probiotics aren't like a vitamin where we use them every day. Probiotics are living, breathing organisms. We don't burn through them per se, or shouldn't be unless we're going on antibiotics or things like that. They ought to be able to be growing and thriving and rebuilding and strengthening. But what we've learned over the last, like I said, decade or so is that we have this really crazy diverse microbiome. It ought to have thousands of different species in there. There ought to be about 100 trillion bacteria in the microbiome. That's These are big numbers. And there's no such thing as a human probiotic supplement that has more than like 100 different species. And if you're trying to nourish 3,000, 100 is a drop in the bucket. And we also have the issue with human probiotics just not being particularly resilient. They die at room temperature in most cases. Stomach acid will kill them in most cases. The reason they work and people will get relief with them is because they end up being largely what are called postbiotics, which people are just starting to talk about. They're being wiped out in either heat or acid in the stomach. But the microDNA in that bacteria is still delivering a message to the gut and helping us feel better, reducing gassiness or bloating, improving immune response, things like that. But if we've been on a bunch of antibiotics, which unfortunately most of the country has, particularly if we were on them in the first 4 years of life when the human microbiome was formed, then we need a lot more than just symptom relief, which is what most human strain probiotics are going to provide. And spores do something that other bacteria don't do. They get into the system. They're what are called transient. They don't stay there. They'll hang out for like 30 to 45 days, depending on a few variables. While they're in there, they'll actually create little metabolites that break down and get rid of pathogenic things, parasites, mold, yeast, these types of things. And then they also create an environment that's very conducive to the growth of all the good guys that are still hanging out down there, which means that instead of getting just a little bit of that diversity that we need, we get a much broader range of diversity. And we've learned that, at least as far as the microbiome goes, diversity is more important than quantity. We need to make sure we have a nice wide range of good guys. And so when we look at things like leaky gut, when we look at things like IBS, when we look at things like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis or mental health, because that's the first place I go when somebody says I'm dealing with anxiety or depression or OCD, I always start gut first, not brain first, because that's just where it starts. You alluded to that earlier. When we're looking at any of those things, we have to rebuild the microbiome first. That's always ground zero for me.
So we're rebuilding the gut, and also the gut barrier is critical. What are some of your favorite tools for the gut barrier, by the way?
So, well, one thing, spores are amazing for that. There's actually excellent studies showing Bacillus coagulans, Bacillus clausii, Bacillus subtilis. Those are the three big bacterial strains that have the most research on them and that I use the most of, that they will actually start to heal the gut lining within as little as 30 days of taking them. So that's tool number one. I'm a huge believer in L-glutamine. It's super simple. It's an amino acid that we need, that we get a lot of in our meals. But when we isolate it and take it on its own on an empty stomach, it's phenomenal for the gut lining. It also happens to be fantastic post-workout to help you with muscle recovery and all that stuff as well. And it's one of the best immunomodulators there is. So it's great for cold and flu season. Lots of reasons why glutamine makes sense. Things like marshmallow, slippery elm can be extremely soothing to the gut and essentially kind of coat the lining of the gut and allow it to heal. If you think about the Pepto-Bismol commercials and the one that coats is the only one you need, these are nature's versions of that kind of. You don't want Pepto-Bismol. But anyway, so these are the type
That's another
of things.
can of worms.
That is, yeah, pink one.
Your next episode, instead of Centrum.
Yeah, if you don't want heavy metals, you don't want Pepto-Bismol. But those are some of my favorites. There are a lot of other things that make a lot of sense. But again, with the amount of time we have, I'm a huge believer in really good quality whole leaf aloe vera juice for that too.
Yes, 1,000%. And we have a whole episode on polysaccharides
Oh,
and this
awesome.
guy who's been studying aloe for ages. So everybody can go back to that too. So let's talk about the brain.
Okay.
As we said, nobody has these pharmaceutical deficiencies.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about it all the time. The brain is mostly fat. You mentioned omega-3s, B vitamins, magnesium. Will you talk about the mechanisms of why these tools are so important and helpful when it comes to, our mental emotional state?
Yeah, for sure. First off, we have to understand that the superhighway known as the vagus nerve is taking more traffic from gut to brain to gut than any other area of the body. And it actually is an interesting thing. If you're ever driving down your freeway system wherever you live, during rush hour, one side is congested and the other side's moving pretty good, right? And then at the other end of the day, it's the opposite. It's not quite how the vagus nerve works. There's actually a lot more traffic always going from gut to brain. because of exactly what you said. Neurotransmitters like serotonin, GABA are largely made in the gut and have to be delivered to the brain. So again, if there's leaky gut, if there's gut dysbiosis, in fact, I would say this, the thing that I always ask people when they say, I've got a brain problem or a mental health problem or whatever it is that they want to call it, anxiety, depression, those types of things. The first thing I always ask is, how's your gut? Because I can first off guarantee that about 9 times out of 10, they'll say, well, it's not so great either. And yet the more concerning thing is usually the mental emotional state, because that messes with you even more than, having a messy gut does on the side of things that I guess hurts the most, which is up there, right? So I always ask about that. And the first thing that we always have to recognize is that fix the gut first, fix the gut first. But as far as nourishing the brain, it's funny because yesterday I did a whole show on nourishing the brain. So this is great timing.
Perfect.
There's a couple of things that I like to focus on. There's ATP, which your body, adenosine triphosphate. A lot of people hear that and they think of muscle, and that's for sure a big place where ATP is produced in muscle cells. But about 20% of the ATP that's produced in the body is produced in the brain. And the brain's a pretty small part of the body. So when you think about that quantity of energy that's produced in the brain from the neurons, and then you also think, Jen, this is something, I don't know if you've talked about this on the show, but I think people's eyes get wide when they hear this. There are more neurons in the gut than there are in the brain. So we actually have more quote unquote brain cells downstairs than we do upstairs. And that's an interesting thing to think about. So again, ATP is the fuel source that the mitochondria produce. Supporting ATP production makes a huge difference, regardless of whether or not you're trying to find your keys or you're trying to not dip into depression or feel anxious or things like that. And so there's an area where there's another supplement that, for lack of a better term, pardon the pun, is a no-brainer, is creatine. Because creatine, the research on it is deeper than any other supplement. And they are finding so much value, ignoring athletics, which is where it used to always be and still is a huge player, just looking at the brain and prevention of Alzheimer's, dementia, and also just overall brain activity, reducing brain fog, helping with quick recall, and helping with mental health issues. Creatine plays a massive, massive role because it helps the body make ATP. So that's really, really important. You mentioned the brain is mostly fat. That's true. We have a real lopsided thing going on in America with fat, where we have tons of seed oils in our diets and very few omega-3 fatty acids in our diets. Most seed oils are either 6s or 9s. And the interesting thing is we need those omegas, but we get so many of them, and most of them are pretty hammered by the time they get to us because of, processing and cooking and things like that. The average American, based on the research that I read, and it varies from thing to thing, you probably have read 100 articles on this too, is like we're maybe like 20-1, maybe 15-1. People that are really doing good are maybe a little less than that in terms of ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. And again, we need both of these, but optimally the ratio ought to be maybe closer to 3-1. Some places say 7-1, but we're not even close to either one of those ratios. And
Yeah, I've even heard as bad as 40-1.
Yeah. Well, and it just depends. I mean,
yeah,
if you're eating the junk food diet that is, pretty standard for a lot of people, and you're eating out twice a day or 3 times a day or whatever, yeah, you probably are in that 40-1 area. And that's terrible, because on the omega-6 side, you have inflammation, and on the omega-3 side, you have anti-inflammation. And we have to have, inflammation is critical to life. We have to have inflammation, but proper inflammation, not chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation leads to like 85% of disease in America. So feeding the body, feeding the brain with fat, the gray matter of the brain is largely made up of DHA, which primarily comes from fish oil. Your body can make it from vegetable sources, but it's most easily accessed from fish oil. Huge, huge player in mental health and well-being. There's tons of research even indicating that moms who supplement DHA while baby is in the womb have kids that are far less likely to have ADHD, these types of things. So just the nourishment of the brain is huge. And then calming the brain with magnesium. Magnesium it's such a critical player, which is, like I said, it's the first thing, always the first thing. Always take magnesium, and always take a high bioavailable magnesium, because it plays a role in calming the central nervous system. It plays a role in calming the mind. It plays a role in calming the entire body. And when the body is calm and the nervous system is calm, the brain also tends to be more calm. When we're tensed up and tight, it affects us head to toe. And so magnesium is absolutely critical there. And then there's a whole lot of other things. Protein is extremely important. Amino acids play a role in the production of neurotransmitters. So whether we're talking about serotonin or dopamine or epinephrine or norepinephrine or any of those things, we don't have enough amino acids, we don't have enough production. And you mentioned B vitamins are critical as well.
Yeah. And, this time of year too, you mentioned how much we use up magnesium. We use up the B vitamins too. I
Yeah,
mean,
for
we
sure.
just, eat them up. So I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about, as much as there are roadblocks in the chemistry, the life roadblocks, the life root causes, that mindset piece. What are some of the things that you really want people to know or think about in that domain? And how does that interplay then too with all the supplementation and the biochemistry?
Well, I'll say this, and this is an interesting thing that I say all the time because it doesn't help me in my business. Okay. Supplements are what I sell for a living. I love supplements. I'm a huge believer in supplements. I'm happy to sell anybody supplements that wants to buy supplements. But the best advice I can give anybody is absolutely free. And that is mindset work. You getting on top of what's going on in your brain and primarily in your subconscious mind through what you're doing with your conscious mind is more important than any supplement that I can sell you. I would dare say it's probably more important than anything you can put into your body is what you're actually putting into your mind. And the primary talk that you hear every day is self-talk. It's what you're saying or thinking about yourself, what you're telling other people about yourself, and so on. And when we talk about the reticular activating system, which I saw you get a big smile on your face when I mentioned that before,
Yeah,
Jen,
right.
the RAS, I always tell people, watch your RAS, your RAS, because you got to be really, really careful what you're feeding it. It's a filter that we have so much information, especially today. I mean, my gosh, I was talking about the freeway analogy. You're driving down the road and you've got, music playing, or you're listening to this podcast, or you're having a conversation and you're seeing billboard after billboard and there's cars all around you and there's people honking and just a million things going on. The amount of information filtering into our brain is massive, but the RAS is what breaks it down into just the little bit of information that we absolutely need to focus on right now, not running somebody over while we're driving down the freeway, that sort of thing. And when we think about the RAS and we think about health and we think about both physical and mental health, it all starts with what we are telling ourselves. And our brain doesn't understand when we are being sarcastic, and which is a real challenge for me because that's my favorite my favorite thing to be. It doesn't understand when we are being, hyperbolic. It takes everything at face value, essentially. So my son, he's 13 years old, my youngest, and he's so smart. He's probably the smartest kid have ever known. He's incredibly brilliant. Things come so easily to him. And when he makes a mistake, he has a habit of saying, I'm dumb or I'm stupid. And I have a habit of saying, Xander, don't say that to yourself. You have to understand that your brain believes you. And we have to be really, really careful with that. My wife, I tell her story. And if anybody, we're not going to get into it much here, obviously. Her whole story is called Jenn's Story. It's on my podcast. And it's a story of resilience, like crazy resilience, until she finally found the answers and figured out how to get herself out of the hole that she was in, especially on the mental emotional side. And there's real beauty and power in her message. But one of the biggest things that got her there was when she stopped telling herself stories that were not true about who she is and what she is. When we met, she said, I am bipolar. And I said, no, you are not, because nobody's bipolar. You may deal with symptoms that in a big red book somewhere say that you're have bipolar
You
disorder,
have,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, but you are not that thing. And she had taken that on, and she had learned to not hope, because when she had hoped in the past, those hopes had been smashed up by other people, by things that she'd done, life circumstances or whatever else. And so she was just slogging through life. And when we tell ourselves enough how broken we are in whatever area. So like if you're listening to this show, there's odds are you're concerned about your fitness, maybe your weight, maybe your health, whatever it is that, because Jenn talks about all these things, right? And if you're one who says, I'm fat, Stop saying I'm fat if you don't want to be fat, because your brain believes you and you are logging that in there. And your brain will actually, through your reticular activating system, help you figure out how to stay fat, because that's what it believes you want to be if you keep telling yourself that that's what you are. It wants to actually prove to you. That's what confirmation bias is. It wants to prove you right, even if you're wrong. And that's a little tricky, but it's really important.
Yeah, I love it. I did a nutrition nugget called I am versus I have.
Yes.
And it's exactly that, right? And then there's also the idea of nocebo, where if we don't believe something's going to work, it won't.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, even with our physicians, right? If they say to you, I don't think this treatment's going to work, it won't.
Yeah. My mother, again, parents were weird. I'm weird. We rarely ever go to a doctor for anything. And we got to kind of be dying, right? If we're going to run to the doctor, because we have these other answers that we've discovered. And she ended up with cataracts. And I tried to do things with, nutrition and supplements to help her with those. And they were getting worse. We hadn't figured it out yet. I actually know more about cataracts now than I did back then. But regardless, we had tried to figure it out. She finally opted to do surgery, but she was terrified of doctors because she had had a couple of not great experiences and generally just believed that doctors were a last resort type of a situation for her. And we were sitting down talking about it. And I said, Mom, you've got to reframe this entire thing. You can't be scared of the thing that you're making the decision to do. And you can't believe that it's not going to work. And you can't believe there's going to be side effects, because believe it or not, that's exactly what's likely to happen if those are the beliefs that you walk in with. So let's shift the framing and decide what's actually going to happen based on the outcome that you want, not the outcome that you're fearful might happen. And things get better in that instance. Even if you make a decision that you aren't excited about, but you believe that it's the right decision for you, get on board, because placebo and nocebo matter almost as much as what the decision is in the first place. I 100% concur.
1,000%.
Yeah.
Love that. Awesome. Final thought to wrap this up before we do our rapid fire off topic questions.
Do I have a final thought?
Yeah.
I've never had a final thought, Jen. I have so many thoughts. That's impossible.
Maybe just one for this moment. Right?
Sure. Let's give you a final thought. I will say this. I think the single biggest mistake that has been kind of, perpetrated on the American people and worldwide, but especially in this country, is that we have become convinced that we need to put our health in the hands of someone who's an expert about our health. And I believe that you're the greatest expert on your own health at all times. And so, yes, we should find people who we trust to advise us on our health, to do that surgery that we have, to educate us on supplements or fitness or diet or whatever it is. Those people are extremely valuable, but they are not you, and they are not in charge of your health. And when we put our health in the hands of somebody else and say, you know what, I don't trust myself with my own health, and so I'm going to put that on you, I don't think we get the outcome that we're looking for very often. It's really, really critical that we begin to trust ourselves, trust our intuition about our health. I think that's really, really important. This society has become less intuitive as we've gone along, and I think that's a big mistake. And also, not just our intuition and our instinct, but our education. And if you're not educated on the thing that you feel needs to be fixed, get educated on that thing, because you will make better decisions for you than anyone else can.
Mic drop. 1,000%. Couldn't agree with you more. It's almost like you've already read my book.
Maybe that should be my final thought. Maybe I should stop talking
exactly.
permanently.
No, not at all. All right. It's time for a rapid fire off topic questions. You ready?
Absolutely.
All right. What's the best thing you've done for your health this week? What's the naughtiest thing you've done related to your health this week? Not that anything's really naughty, but the salad and fries of your week, if you will.
Okay. Best thing I've done for my week is I got up on Monday morning at 5 a.m. That's my new time. This is not natural for me, Jen. This is new in the last few weeks. Okay. I got up. I was very, very tired. I almost hit snooze. Instead of hitting snooze, I walked to my basement where my little home gym is. I got to work, and it changed the whole dynamic of my day. My energy was where it needed to be. My mental focus was where it needed to be. And it set me up for a very good day with very little naughtiness. As far as what I've done that has been naughty this week, my favorite food in the whole wide world is pizza. And nothing's close. Pizza is the greatest food. It always has been the greatest food. I'll fight anybody over it. And most of the time now, in an attempt to be less naughty, we make our own with, clean ingredients and our own little pizza oven and that kind of thing. But I did order pizza. I was not particularly cautious with what I put on that pizza, and I enjoyed it very much.
Love it. All right. If you weren't a health educator, host of Vitality Radio, and the owner of Vitality Nutrition, what would you do?
Oh, man, I have no idea. I'll tell you what I would want to do. I would want to be a rock star. I would want to be up on stage. I would want to be a lead guitarist for a hard rock band. That's what I always wanted to do. The only thing missing is I never learned how to play the guitar.
Same. But it's one of those things where I just want to know how to play it. I don't want to learn how to play it.
Exactly. It's a lot of work.
All right. Your favorite book on any topic other than your area of expertise, or you could give us a fiction book.
I think I'm going to go with a book that almost nobody's ever heard of called The Alliance. The Alliance is by a guy named Gerald Lund. It's a fiction book. It's a post-apocalyptic book that was written when I was a teenager. That's when I read it first. I've read it 5 or 6 times since. And it's all about liberty and freedom, which mean a lot to me. And it's just a really, really beautiful book.
All right. Adding it to the list. If you could cure one ailment, disease, or sickness, what would it be?
Well, it has to be Parkinson's disease because that's what my dad went down with.
If you were a superhero, what would be your superpower?
I guess of all the superpowers out there, probably flight. Flight seems like it's got the most universal applications for me.
Yeah. All right. Next one, your biggest pet peeve.
I'll go back to what I was just talking about. My biggest pet peeve is hearing people talk themselves down. It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Although I shouldn't say it drives me crazy because it doesn't drive me crazy because I'm not crazy. And I just said I'm going to be driven crazy. See how easy it is?
Right. All right. Last one, in your opinion, what's the next frontier in wellness?
Probably the biggest thing that I'm the most excited about in wellness is actually fecal transplant. They call it microbiota transplant. I actually just had a gentleman on. In fact, if you want his name, it's an amazing interview all about what that is, where it's going. Our guts are so wrecked in this country, for the most part, that some people can't get there with supplementation to where they really need to be. And I think it might be the answer for a lot of the really nasty things out there, like severe autism, all the mental, emotional stuff that people are dealing with because the gut's such a critical thing. I'm really intrigued by where that's going.
Yeah, we looked into it years ago for a client of mine who wasn't a candidate, but this is a whole other conversation that we can have. All right. Well, Jared St. Clair, thank you for being here. Tell everybody how to connect with you, where to learn more, Vitality Nutrition, all the things.
Absolutely. Vitality Radio Podcast is the show. If you want to start with one episode, I'll give you 2 episodes to start with. Jenn's story, because she's the love of my life, and it's a beautiful story. And the Vital 5 episode, which talks about why I think those 5 supplements are so critical for most people. Those are great places to start. Our store is located in Bountiful, Utah. If you happen to be in the neighborhood, we'd love to see your face. But obviously, we are also in the online world at vitalitynutrition.com. And we are a full service supplement business. We have our own formulas for sure under the Vitality Nutrition brand, but we carry lots of the other stuff that you're looking for as well. And then on Instagram, we're doing better on social media. I've been a little bit lazy about it, but we're firing that back up. It's at Vitality Nutrition Bountiful.
Perfect. And we'll connect links to everything below in the episode notes for you all. Jared, thank you so much. Just your passion comes through and it is so appreciated. And, for somebody who is in the supplement space as well and also talks about everything else that goes with the supplements, I truly appreciate you.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you. It was so much fun having you on my show. Really appreciate you returning the favor.
Absolutely. All right, friends. On Friday in this week's bite-sized bonus episode, we're talking about Drizzylicious. So this one came from Caitlin, who's on my social media team, speaking of social media. So she said she tried them and they're her latest obsession. She suggested we do a nutrition nugget on them. So here you go, Caitlin and everyone. So that's coming on Friday in this week's bite-sized bonus episode. Be sure wherever you're listening, click the plus sign or the follow button, and then your app will alert you when it goes live on Friday morning. Well, as always, everybody, I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram or all social media. I'm at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK. Website is asaladwithasideofries.com. Pick your platform, send a message. I love hearing from you, your takeaways, your ideas, your questions. It's also the easiest way to learn more about working with me as your health coach. And Jared St. Clair, thank you again for being here with us this week.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure.
Likewise. And friend, if you are not already, become a member of the Happy Healthy Hub. You'll go to asaladwithasideofries.com/membership. This shows your support for this podcast, this community, and of course, your health. On top of this week's episode in full video with behind the scenes pieces and your 24/7 Ask Me Anything, you'll get this week's recipe for chocolate cuties. So until next week, remember, the season may feel like a lot. We see you. You will be okay. And this may be a time to increase your commitment to both healthful lifestyle choices and supplementation. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.